Namaskar and good afternoon to all of you. And I'm Yogendra Deva, your host for today's program. And on behalf of the Dhawan Academy, I welcome you all to this 1 hour brainstorming session. Today is Saturday, 30th May, and this is our second edition of the open house. The first one we conducted on 2nd of May, beginning of this month. The open house is a series of participant-driven 1 hour brainstorming session, and where we announce the program, and the program brochure invites participants to register and suggest topic. We invite an expert faculty for an expert presentation on the common interest-related topic, and after the presentation, we answer the participants' questions. This is a complimentary program from the Academy of Geologists. There is no participation fee for this. So you are welcome to the second edition. Today we have more than 130 registered participants, and in the open house edition 1, we received about 100 topics for forthcoming open houses, and again today we have received about 51 new suggested topics. So we have a huge listing of about more than 150 topics we have with us, on which we will try to deliver the open houses on selected topics. And today's common interest topic is criteria for earthquake resistant design of infrastructure, and the speaker is none other than Dr. Prabhas Pandey, formerly Additional Director General, Geological Survey of India, and he is an authority on seismology, on earthquake geology, basically. And that doesn't mean that he doesn't deal with other subjects. He's an expert in engineering geology, landslides, and many other subjects. So, I mean, in the DDAG Open House 1, we had the majority of topics on engineering geology. Subjects were something like theory of engineering geology, rock mass classification, geological surprises, and so on and so forth. On engineering, there were 10 topics, geological hazards 8, mineral exploration 7, geology 7, rock stresses 6, rock mechanics 5. And there were other topics like groundwater, geophysics, geotourism, environment, geoscience, surveying, and even documentation, how the reports are to be made and how the data are to be reported. And now we will be updating this information, I mean these topics, because we have received 51 more topics. So I thank you for your patience in hearing to me, and I thank you once again, and welcome. And please feel free to raise your queries in chat box. We encourage queries in chat box. We shall take these up after the presentation one by one. And today I think Mr. Dr. Pandey is speaking on criteria for earthquake resistant design. But since Delhi has been shattered by one more earthquake only yesterday, just before one day of this presentation, and Dr. Pandey has already written a very good article in Outlook last week itself on Delhi earthquake. So I don't know, but personally I feel we will have more queries on Delhi earthquake than on his actual topic. So, and don't worry, if your query is not answered due to time constraint, we shall revert with answer by mail. And before we hand over the platform to Dr. Pandey, I think it would be nice, and maybe Dr. Gopal Dhawan, founder and chairman of the Dhawan Academy of Geologists, I think he would like to say a few words about Dr. Pandey. He doesn't need any introduction as such, but I think Dr. Dhawan would like to introduce Dr. Pandey today. So now it is over to Dr. Dhawan. Dr. Dhawan, please.
Thank you, Devasa. Good afternoon, friends. I am Gopal Dhawan, your co-host today. Dr. Pandey is a well-known name in infrastructure industry. He is a renowned earthquake geologist. Rather, as Mr. Devas said, he is a rare blend of engineering geology and earthquake geology. Dr. Pandey has worked extensively for River Valley and communication projects. He has carried out studies for 15 major damaging earthquakes that have occurred in the Indian subcontinent since 1991. He was a member of the group responsible for preparing Seismotectonic Atlas of India by GSI. He was also on BIS committee for finalizing 5th version of Indian Seismic Code. Dr. Pandey superannuated as Additional Director General from Geological Survey of India in 2011. Even after his retirement, he is very active as State Coordinator of National Seismic Risk Mitigation Program and Technical Advisor to Nuclear Power Corporation. We at Dhawan Academy of Geologists feel honored that he is associated with us as a mentor and a senior consultant. You must have seen his recent article on low magnitude earthquakes experienced by Delhi NCR region during this month. He has written this article in Outlook and we had provided you the link. Even yesterday itself, as Mr. Deva said, there was an earthquake of magnitude 4.5 Richter. This is an issue of concern amongst residents of Delhi NCR. So we thought this is the most relevant topic which we can choose during the present time. And none else would be a better choice than Dr. Pandey to speak on earthquake resistant design of structures. With this, I invite Dr. Prabhash Pandey to take charge of this webinar. Over to Dr. Pandey, sir. Dr. Pandey, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deva and Dr. Gopal Dhawan. At this outset, I must express my gratitude to DDAG, particularly Dr. Gopal Dhawan, Dr. Vaideva, and Ramesh Narayanji for inviting me to this session so that I'm able to share my views. Not the least, this entire effort, technological effort, has been done by Anirudh. That is how I am able to reach up to you. He spent about almost 3-4 hours because these things are new to me. Anyway, I'm able to, and Mr. Deva is handling my PowerPoint because I was unable to operate it from my laptop. I'm speaking to you from my mobile.
Sir, I am at your service.
Thank you very much, sir.
Your presentation is being handled by Dr. Gopal Dhawan. I'm handling something else.
Oh, thank you, sir. Now, this half-an-hour talk, which is on a very, very intricate subject involving inputs from various disciplines of earth science and earthquake engineering. My scope of presentation here would be limited to, you can say, introduction and some brief outline about how to proceed. I understand that most of you would be familiar with the process of earthquake science and familiar with the terminology which I've been using here. Sorry. I've planned to present to you a few major aspects. One is on building codes, Second is on nuclear facility designs. And lastly, which is most important for most of you, is the seismic design of river valley projects, particularly the dams. Now, I would give you a brief on what happens when an earthquake occurs. The rupture takes place somewhere deep in the crustal portion. At this stage, what happens is that the strained segment of a fault, when it ruptures suddenly, it releases a lot of strain energy, which travels to the surface of the earth through various phases of seismic waves. And on reaching the surface, it causes the damage and whatever you can think of. And it all depends upon the degree of shaking and the duration of shaking. In one way, the magnitude of the earthquake is proportional to the duration of shaking as well as to the amplitude of shaking. Apart from damage to the structures, there are various secondary effects, which we also call as the terrain effects of an earthquake. And they could be liquefaction in liquefiable zones like Kutch area. There could be huge number of landslides as in the Himalaya, or it can cause sash, which could be damaging. Means water waves in, say, tanks and enclosed water bodies, or there can be flash floods. I'll tell you one very significant example. During this 1950 Great Upper Assam earthquake, huge number of landslides took place. And one of these landslides blocked the course of Subansiri River, about 9 kilometers upstream of the dam site. And when this dam got breached, huge flash floods were generated, and it swept away some 500 people in Assam. So these are the secondary and tertiary effects which any sensible, mature designer will take into account, apart from the ground shaking. Next, please. I would like to mention one thing here, that it is inevitably 100% the earthquake generates in the crustal mass in rock formations. And the seismic waves travel for majority of its path through rock medium. But in many of the cases, when it reaches the surface, it encounters low density medium, that is soil. And it radically transforms the character of the seismic waves. It is because there is a sudden change in the velocity. When the waves are traveling through, you can say, rock mass, it has a velocity of 1,500 meters per second or higher. But when it comes to this low density medium of soil, then there is a sudden reduction in velocity. And to compensate for energy losses, the amplitude of ground motions increases radically. This is also happening in case of tsunami. In deep sea, the wavelength is very, very large, but the wave height is very small. But when it reaches the shores, because of the resistance provided by the seabed, there is phenomenal increase in the run-up, or you can say the wave height, and the velocity of movement decreases considerably. The second major thing which happens here is the reverberations. Means the seismic waves tend to get stopped here. So the duration of seismic motions increases in soil medium. And thirdly, which is most important, and which we take care in, you can say, the seismic microzonation, is attenuation or amplification of the waves in certain frequencies. So these are the very distinct effects of sites, and wherever we are designing, the site effects are to be taken into account. Next, please. This is very important part from earthquake engineers' point of view. Earthquake engineers are interested in strong ground motions because the peak accelerations occurred at very high frequencies. Integration of earthquakes are what they are looking for. And the three prime characteristics of earthquake motion are the amplitude of vibrations. Second is the frequency content, and third is the duration of strong motion. I'll come to all these factors one by one, and I think I'll be able to explain it better when I'm coming to the response spectrum. Am I going fast or is it all right? Now, without the knowledge of these three parameters, the ground motion characteristics cannot be assessed properly or in a rational way. So it is important from the point of view of response behavior of the structure. It is especially important for embankment dams. They are the most affected by this. Now, what is this peak ground acceleration which you are seeing here? The most commonly used measure of a particular ground motion is peak horizontal acceleration, which generally has a vertical acceleration. Have received. Now here in this case, we are more interested in the horizontal acceleration rather than the vertical acceleration. And an explanation for it is that the vertical forces in constructed works usually provide adequate resistance to dynamic forces induced by vertical accelerations during earthquakes. Generally, if you are able to determine the peak ground acceleration, horizontal peak ground acceleration, the vertical acceleration is derived by multiplying the horizontal acceleration by a factor of 2/3. Next, please. Okay. Now you have to, because response spectra is something which should be understood particularly by the geologists, because in earlier times when I was very young in the Geological Survey of India, the maximum knowledge that we had was of magnitude. Means we were very well aware that if a magnitude of 7 is there, a lot of damage would take place to buildings. If a magnitude 5 earthquake is there, the magnitude damage would be less, much less. Then when we graduated to the next stage, we came to the level of PGA, that is peak ground acceleration. And till now, even very learned people, they think that PGA is the ultimate thing. Means if they are able to derive the PGA, then it means they are able to design the dam. But that is not the case. See, there are various examples where PGA of very high order of say 0.5 G has been recorded, but there has been no significant damage. So it does not provide information regarding the frequency content and the duration of motion. So these two other parameters which are important in deciding the degree of damage are not given by this PGA factor. So PGA has to be used with these two other factors when we take up the design of dams or any other structure. Now, if I describe the response spectra, and I'll be showing you one response curve. It states that describes the maximum response to a particular input motion as a function of natural frequency and damping ratio. Damping ratio, this aspect I will also deal a little later. Next, Gopal Dhawanji. Now, before we proceed ahead, because I've said that I'll take up the buildings first. And for this building, the seismic zone map is very important. Even for other structures, this has to be consulted. Now, what does it convey? What does this zone 5 convey? 10.9% of the country's area falls in zone 5. Here, an seismic intensity on MSK scale could be of the order of 9 or above. Its zone factor is 0.36, and it is included in very high hazard zone. Now, what is this 0.36? It is in fact the effective peak ground acceleration. And you can say very general term, you can say this is the PGA value which is given. Similarly, for zone 4, a PGA value of 0.24. For zone 3, a PGA value of 0.16. And for zone 2, the PGA value of 0.10. Now, for construction of buildings, in normal buildings, in any part of the country, this map is taken as the guiding force. Here, the design engineer will take, say, if he is constructing a building in Noida, then he will take in which zone Noida falls. Supposing it is falling in zone 4, he will take the EPGA or the zone factor of 0.24, and he will design it after taking into factor the natural period of the building. He will work out the seismic coefficient, and accordingly he will design. But for sophisticated structures like nuclear power plants, for high dams and others, you have to do site-specific analysis, and you have to work out the entire spectrum, including the PGA, the duration, the frequency content, separately for that particular site. I'll be coming to that also. Next, please. Now, this is the image of a response spectra for 5% damping. Now, this response spectra for 5% damping is also referred to as the target response spectra. Here in the y-axis, you have got the spectral acceleration values in terms of G, and here you have got the frequency content in the x-axis. Frequency content here is not given in terms of hertz, it is given in terms of period per second, means the reciprocal of hertz value. Now, if you see intently, what you are seeing here, you have got 3 types of media. One is type 1, that is rock and hard soil. The second is medium soil, and third is the soft soil. Now, they've got specific shapes. Now, I will give you one small example. So here it is starting 0. So this PGA is also referred to as the 0 period acceleration. Now, in this curve, the PGA is say 1G here. And supposing you are designing a building in seismic zone 4, this 1 will be converted into 0.24, and accordingly the values will change. And you will, supposing you have got a structure of 5-story, which has got a natural frequency of 5.5. So accordingly, you will be able to derive this SA upon G factor. And this is put in this formula, seismic horizontal seismic coefficient, that is AH, which is equal to Z upon 2. Z is what? The zone factor. Supposing you are designing for Noida or Delhi, zone factor was 0.24. It is divided by 2, that is 0.12. It is multiplied by I upon R. I is the importance factor. It has only 2 values. I for important buildings is 1.5, and for normal buildings it is 1. And R is the reduction factor, means every building has got its inherent resistance power, and it has got some 9 values given in the code. So you put this, and SA upon G you can derive from this. So when this equation is solved, you get the horizontal seismic coefficient which you are using for the design of the structures. So this is the basics of this particular design. Next, please. Now, one more thing I would like to express here, because this has not been expressed, is that if supposing your foundations are deep below, say below 30 meters, so what you do, you derive this seismic property divided by 2. And if supposing the foundation is at a depth of 15 meters, then AH upon this horizontal seismic coefficient, and this is linearly interpolated and the value is derived accordingly. So as you go deep below, this accelerations decrease. Same is the case when you are going for underground structures. Same is the case when you are doing the tunneling. So the seismic coefficient in underground works decreases according. I am coming to the Atomic Energy Regulatory Board guidelines. Since I'm involved with this organization, I will give you a very brief. To ensure seismic safety, nuclear facilities are designed to withstand the effects of vibratory ground motions and other secondary effects. And the design basis ground motions are derived in similar manner as we are deriving for dams and other structures, which I'll be taking up a little later on. Next, please. The important thing is here, if your site, nuclear power plant site, falls in seismic zone 5, or if an active fault occurs in a radius of 5 kilometers from the nuclear power plant, nuclear site, then that site is rejected automatically, which is not the case even in case of very high dams. Means we'll design it as per the seismic status, but we'll not reject the site. Otherwise, most of the dams which are falling in the northeast region would not have been constructed. But there won't come any nuclear power plant in the northeast region because the entire area falls in seismic zone 5. Or so they're very specific. They have got very rigid rules, and they are not compromised. And like here also, we have got various levels of investigation in regional level, which is done on 1:500 scale, intermediate level 1:50,000, site specificity level 5,000, and site area investigations on 1:500. Here I must tell you that this SciSat 2000, which is the Seismotectonic Atlas of GSI, is being extensively used like a Bible by all the nuclear agencies. And Sujit Das Gupta is here in this audience, and he is also to quite an extent responsible for bringing out this atlas. This, seismotectonic investigations. Next, please. I've already told you about these stipulations. Next, please. Now I'm coming to the River Valley projects, because most of you are associated with the construction of dams and tunnels and underground facilities. So I'll be dealing in a little more detail. This NCSDP guidelines apply to gravity arch and embankment dams, barrage, weir, bund, etc., which are more than 15 meters in height and located in seismic zones 5 and 4, but it doesn't apply for canals or temporary cofferdams. There is some other definition of high dams. If the dam length is more than 500 meters or the spillway discharge capacity is more than 2,000 cubic meters, even then it falls in the category of high dams. Now, seismotectonic investigations. Here also we have got a regional seismotectonic appraisal on 1:1 million scale. Seismic history is 6 degree by 6 degree. MEQ survey if dam height is more than 100 meters. Local area tomography or magnetotelluric surveys. Why these surveys, geophysical surveys, are being carried out are to decipher the hidden faults, which may not be picked by surface mapping or by other exploration techniques. These sophisticated geophysical surveys are employed because as the dam height increases, the criticality of the structure also increases. So the level of investigations also go up. Next, please. Now, what are the steps that we take for hazard analysis, say for a dam? Is compilation of earthquake catalog. This is a very tedious process, and the area involved is very large, means 6 degree by 6 degree. That is, say, 600 kilometers by 600 kilometers. So you have to really work very hard, and this compilation of earthquake catalog is a not simple process. You have to decluster the earthquakes, you have to homogenize the magnitudes, and only then you come out with a plausible earthquake catalog, which is used for these seismic designs. Then comes the identification of seismic source zones. I'll come to a map where this is explained. And this is the most useful or the most tedious exercise. And it requires a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge of the seismotectonics of a very large area before we decide these seismic zones. And our total results can go haywire if these seismic zones are not properly identified or they are extrapolated without the knowledge of the region. Then selection of a suitable attenuation relationship. See, there are more than 24 attenuation relationships. And most of these have been derived for American conditions. Some little efforts have been made for Indian, and we try to take these. Now, what I've shown with the red are, you can say these are M, the magnitude, and R is the distance, the epicentral distance. So these are the prime controlling factors in deciding A. What is A? Is the PGA value. So these, the selection of suitable attenuation relationship is a very tricky thing and can be done only by very experienced persons. And then the deterministic and probabilistic seismic analysis for developing target response spectra. So these are all very specialized things, and a lot of, you can say, consensus is required, and actual acumenship is required for doing these exercises. Next, please. Now, this is a typical seismic zone of, say, northwest Himalaya or northwest region. Here we were given an assignment, and in this northwest part of India, we identified 18 discrete seismotectonic blocks, which had got, you can say, different seismotectonic attitudes. And they are used for analyzing the effect of ground motions at, say, your site of interest. I'll not go into the details. Next, please. And what is this site-specific seismic response spectra? You derive the natural period of dam section, then horizontal seismic coefficient for MC and dB conditions, vertical seismic coefficient for MC and dB conditions, and duration of shaking. Now, I'll give you a very brief background of what is this MC and dB conditions. MC is the maximum credible earthquake which can occur in a seismotectonic block, and dB is the design basis earthquake. So both these factors have to be determined by deterministic as well as probabilistic analysis, and the average of the two is taken for developing the final response spectra, which is taken in the design. And then duration of shaking, there is a separate procedure how this duration of shaking is arrived at. Next, please. I think this is the concluding part, because Devasa was very strict to be following the time schedule. So I'll say that evaluation criteria for earthquake-resistant designs of infrastructures is a highly specialized procedure requiring collective inputs from experts of various disciplines. It cannot be, say, done by a seismologist alone. It cannot be done by an earthquake engineer alone, not by a structural engineer alone, or by a geologist alone. So there has to be collective responsibility and collective effort for providing various inputs which go into the design of such structures. Secondly, apart from only a limited number of institutions in India having an overall expertise in handling such a complex issue, the DDAG also possesses the required qualification to take up the task in a professional manner. Means they've got some consultants who are capable, who have already done such exercises for various difficult terrains. So if anybody is inquisitive, they can contact with DDAG management. Thank you very much. I think I was right on time, if not right in the contents. Thank you very much. And I express my gratitude to all my colleagues Dr. A.K. Sinha, Dr. Gopal Dhawan, Dr. Navani, with whom I have worked extensively in various engineering projects and earthquake investigation. Thank you very much.
Over to Mr. Deva.
Oh, I'm sorry, my microphone, I think was somebody had put it off. So I'm back again. Thank you very much, Padisab. Thank you. It was a very crisp lecture, very crisp talk. And you have taken us through the whole process of this seismic assessment, the criteria. And it's a definitely is a very complicated thing, but you have been able to finish it within a very short time. I mean, you have honored our punctuality. That is the GDAG USP. I think we have now got time. So if there is anybody who wants to raise a question, I can today, we can just take a deviation from our routine process and take some oral questions if there are any. In the meantime, from my side, I would definitely like that because the audience is there and Delhi NCR has felt some shocks recently, including the one yesterday evening itself. So, and recently, I think many of us in the announcement we had given talked about the your article which you published in the magazine Outlook about these. So, if you are comfortable speaking now, you can take some time and explain that slightly. I mean, your views, what is what, if you are comfortable.
Okay. Thank you, Devasa. Am I audible?
Yes, very much.
Yes. Jain Saab, can you hear? You had some problems with.
No, it's all right now.
Okay.
When the first two tremors occurred, Dr. Gopal Dhawan telephoned me and he wanted to know what are the implications of these earthquakes. At that time, I was never very serious and I gave a very small WhatsApp reply to that. That is, these are not, it is very difficult to predict them, but to me that the activity will stop. And this is what I offhand commented. Then when these 4 earthquakes occurred, there was a telephone call from one of our GSI directors. He said that a journalist wanted to have your opinion on this. So can I give your telephone number? I said, sure. And that journalist was basically a geologist. And he said that I am for the last 30 years in this profession, but I would like to have your views. And I started explaining him. And after, say, half a minute, he said that, why can't you write these things for us? So I said that you kindly give your email ID. And when he sent his email ID, he added one thing, that kindly give an article for 1,000 words. And that is something which requires some deeper study. And he was very particular, like Devasa on the time schedule. So I sat for 2 days and Ramesh through all the database which was lying with me and wrote this article. And in the first very sentence or second sentence, I have written that even for a subject expert, it would be very difficult to guess whether these are the storm activity or they are the precursors of some bigger things to happen, or they are indicators of something bigger to happen far away. So as far as the seismicity of Delhi is concerned, it has got 2 major sources. One is near field, which is spread in an area of, in a radius about 200 kilometers at the junction of Sargodha Delhi Ridge and Delhi Haridwar Ridge. So that's why you keep on seeing these earthquake activities spread in large area, mostly covered by the NCR. And then the Himalayan earthquakes. Himalayan earthquakes, some preliminary study has been carried out by me and some of my colleagues, that even if 8 magnitude earthquakes occur, say in the Himalayan seismic source zone, which is about 250, 300 kilometers away from Delhi, the maximum intensity of 7 would be reached. So a maximum intensity of 7 doesn't mean that the damage could be devastating. But if a local earthquake like that 1720 earthquake occurs, this is a local earthquake because it occurred around Delhi, the damage could be very large, particularly in Delhi of today, because the built environment is now anybody's guess. It means it has all sorts of buildings. Some 42 classes of buildings exist in the Delhi region and the NCR region. So the impact of a powerful earthquake could be really very devastating, and so could be the loss of life.
Dr. Pandey, thank you very much for that. And now we have got actually 2 queries from the audience. So if you can see it, can you see it? So if you can take them up, first one is from Mr. Balraj Joshi, our formerly CMD, NHPC.
Balraj is here in this audience.
He is very much here, very much. We are honored to have him here.
Thank you, Balraj.
Thank you, sir.
Can you read it or shall I read it for you?
No, I'm able to read it.
Can you read it then loudly? Everybody can hear.
And then you read it because the photographs are coming over it.
So Joshi Sahab is asking you, the issue of attenuation relationship is still unresolved as to which relationship shall be adopted. As experienced, the measured acceleration due to a seismic trigger is far too low in comparison with the predicted acceleration from attenuation relationships.
Balraj, this is a very complex issue, and in our exercises we have seen that see, actually earlier there used to be no these attenuation relationships. Mostly the seismic intensities were the base. Now with the proliferation of strong motion recorders, particularly in US, Japan, China and other countries, they've been able to establish some attenuation relationship. And what we do, we try to extrapolate it straight away to our Indian conditions, whether they are Himalayas or in peninsular India or Kutch region, which is not the right approach. But in the paucity of our having no strong motion data, we have to live with it. There are some Indian authors also who have done some attenuation relationship, like Dr. I.D. Gupta and others. But what I have seen is that we try to match it with what has been derived by the American authors. So, and one thing which is I think glaringly missing in this, that these attenuation relationship assume one thing, means the spread of ground motions would be, say, in a circular fashion, which is never the case. It is very strongly controlled by the geological and tectonic aspects. Right. And that is reflected in our intensity maps. In case of this 2015 Nepal earthquake, what we have seen is that there is very sharp attenuation across the Himalayan trend and very strong accentuation of intensities in the line paralleling to the Himalaya. So these attenuation relationships never are able to cater for this ground reality. So at best you can say these are highly, you can say, assumptive values, but we have to live with it. And this is all I can say about it. Thank you.
Can I speak for 1 minute?
Please, sir.
Sure.
So the seismographs and their online monitoring system, which has been installed in NHPC, as you might be aware, we have tried to track some of the recent earthquakes also. And we have then applied all those tectonic formula on the attenuation relationships, and we find that they are grossly overestimating the acceleration. Now, having said that, this is making our structures unnecessarily large. So even though we might be sure from our measurements point of view that the structures which we are designing are safe, but from those relationships which have a basis in Europe and America, as you say, probably are we not erring on a very, very conservative side.
This, certainly, because there is no point in emulating what has been done for America, because they've got a totally different seismotectonic setup than what is existing in the Himalaya particularly. So if we adopt something or directly extrapolate it here, our results could be very, very off. Unless we have got our very strong, robust system of strong motion recorders, we will not be able to generate our own attenuation relationship, which we can use with confidence in our conditions.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Dr. Pandey, you have two more queries. Can you see that?
Yes, I'm seeing it, but if you can read it.
Yeah.
For me.
So there is Sachin Kumar Tripathi asks you that there are three curves mentioned in IS code as type 1, rock and hard rocks, others 2 for soil, type 2 and type 3. How we will exactly define the response curve for the weather layer within rock outcrop as the wave propagation is different?
See, here in case of engineers, they are not defining the medium in terms of their morphological or lithological characteristics. They are defining it in terms of the shear wave velocity. Say for the hard rock or weathered rock, they take a shear wave velocity of that VS30 that they refer to as 750 meters per second. For the medium type of soil, they take it between 750 and some 350. And for soft soil, they take it less than 350 or 300. So this is how they define. And for the normal building constructions, I think this much of classification is good enough. But for sophisticated critical structures, we do site-specific studies in depth, and all these factors are taken care of.
There is one more.
Yes.
From Pradeep Pawar.
Pradeep?
Yes, Pradeep is here. So he says that, can you comment on the special design aspects to be taken into account?
You please name in full. Pradeep?
Pradeep Mawar.
Acha, Mawar sir.
Your friend from Lucknow.
Right.
From Lucknow.
Right.
So he says that, can you comment on the special design aspects to be taken into account for designing such structures as the Chenab River Railway, which lies in both high seismic as well as high strategically sensitive zone?
This is, I think, the answer would be very, very long. And Mawar Sahab has asked something which requires a lot of space in time and to answer. So at this stage, I would only say that for these sophisticated designs, a lot of investigations are required, a lot of special analytical tools are required. Only then we are able to arrive at the parameters for seismic designing of critical structures.
Thank you very much, sir. This brief answer could be sufficient, but my special aspect was that since it is both strategic as well as high seismically sensitive, so the two combined, does it incorporate any design changes? Because once it is high seismic area, you have a design, but it has to be further elaborated once it is a highly strategic zone also.
See, there are so many regulatory bodies in India that whatever studies are done by any agency, howsoever sophisticated they may be, they go through the grill of various bodies. And it takes years for investigations and some more years for getting the designs through. So it is rest assured that all aspects regarding the criticality or the strategic importance of an area are taken care of in this in the design aspects. And ours is a very robust system, robust regulatory system, and no design which is infirm or flimsy will get through for construction.
So, certainly, sir. No, that aspect certainly I rely upon, and our designs are always robust and such things. But academically speaking, I would like to have an insight into it. I could have it either privately from you, or if camp exhibit, sir.
I understand you correctly that I've told you in the very beginning that this is a very intricate issue which requires inputs from various disciplines of various subjects, and only then the designs are completed or finalized. So
Thank you very much, sir.
in this short period, I will not be able to elaborate on that. Thank you.
It's okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Pradeep. Thank you, Pradeep Pawar Saab. Thank you, Pandey Saab, for this. And I think now Dr. Dhawan has got a query for you. So I will ask him to please.
Pandey sir, this active parts has been one of my interest areas. And because Professor Jain is there in this gathering today, he was my teacher. And I was to deliver a seminar as a MTech second year student in 78. And he was one of the examiners. So at that time I failed miserably. So today I am asking you a question on the same topic. You see, in case of nuclear power plants, as you said, that the site is rejected if there is an active fault within 5-kilometer radius. How do you do this? I mean, what are the foolproof methods of saying whether this fault is active or not, number one? And number two, is there any example of a site getting rejected due to an active fault?
Yes, one example is that if you see the entire Himalayan region, no nuclear power plant can be seen. So most of these regions are in seismic zone 5 and they are full of active faults. So that's why they don't go up to the Himalaya. In one instance, I remember Dr. Nawani was also in that meeting. They wanted to have a nuclear power plant in near Dehradun, because every state wants to have a flat curve of power generation, and that's why they wanted a nuclear power plant in Uttarakhand. So I was in that meeting. Dr. Nawani was there, and some more persons from GSI and authorities from Nuclear Power Corporation. The site had to be rejected because you don't find any clear space which is more than 5 kilometers, which you cannot allege to be without active fault. So they readily accepted, and now the maximum seismic zone 4 in Narora is there, and at that time this awareness was not there. But if a nuclear plant comes in India, it has to be in maximum in zone 3. One is coming up in Haryana, in Gorakhpur village, Haryana. That is in size at the border of seismic zone 2 and 3. But you will not find now any nuclear facility coming in zone 4 even, not even what to say of 5. So mostly they are concentrating in zone 2 and zone 3 of the peninsular region, and mostly in the coastal part.
Actually,
you asked one more thing, that how do you prove or disprove an active fault? This is again a very contentious issue, because I have been involved with this active fault program, and starting from the regional surveys, you have to come down to this, you can say this 5 kilometer.
There is some audio disturbance from Mr. Pandey.
Yeah,
Maybe
so very
there's some issue with his net.
Anirudh, are you there?
Yes, sir, trying to contact him.
Anirudh, are you there?
Yes, sir, I am here. I'm trying to contact him.
Just contact him and find out what is wrong. So in the meantime, I mean, I can give you some brief about the Dhawan Academy. Right?
Deva, it is raining in Lucknow, so probably his line had got disturbed.
Yeah, I also think so. I think so. There's some problem with his net.
It is raining here a little heavily.
He's using his mobile. He's using his mobile. So that's
His mobile, his signal often goes.
the mobile also goes.
I think Deva sir, we can listen from Gupta sir.
On what, sir?
I mean, there's only one hot topic. What is going to happen with NCR?
Nothing will happen, sir. As Dr. Pandey has told, that Himalayan earthquakes will not make much damage unless there is something unprecedented, say 1555 type or 1505 type. In normal, even in the Nepal earthquake which occurred, if at the same latitude, if something occurs in the in our Himalayas, I don't think that Delhi will be affected in that much. Of course, tall buildings should be careful. I often tell that tall buildings which have got larger fundamental frequencies and distance earthquakes, they attenuate the short period waves, but they transmit the long period waves. So the long period waves travel far distance. And so that is what happened in Mexico. Even what happened in Ahmedabad during Bhuj earthquake. Remember, Ahmedabad is 250 kilometers away from Bhuj. In between Ahmedabad and Bhuj, there was not much damage. So long period wave can create damage in high-rise building in short buildings, do manzil, teen manzil, 2 or 3 story building, and it will depend. Those are all high frequency waves. No tall buildings will be only short buildings if it is more than 5.5 and around 6. And if it is not properly designed, I don't say that design means anti-seismic design. और जो local mason का design भी जो होता है, if it is done by that, it will be safe. This much I can tell.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Pandey has informed. Mr. Pandey has informed that he is not able to join further.
Okay.
So I think now you should proceed without him.
I think there are 3 more minutes left. We can conclude the session. Would you like to say something, Dhawan sir?
नहीं आप कहिए. You please conclude.
Okay, so I would basically like to thank everybody for joining in. And Dr. Pandey, it's always a great pleasure listening to him. The way he delivers his talks, the content he has got, the experience he has. So today was no different. We had a wonderful session with him. And the discussions were lively. Some queries have been put forward, and we have seen that. But I thought that probably I would have loved some more material on this Delhi earthquakes. But anyways, our time is short. So we have been able to finish today's agenda also in almost 1 year. Still, there are 2 more minutes to go. So this open house series will continue for times to come, because we have got, I mean, more than 150 topics with us, and we will be inviting our expert presenters. So keep your fingers crossed. Next time we will be coming back with 1 more expert presenter, and we shall have a grand session of discussions. The topics are pouring in with the announcement and registration for each open house. So we keep looking forward to more, and there are some really very interesting topics. So let's hope next time we come back with some very interesting topic for you, with some expert of repute. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining in. I can't take all the names. There are so many faces I can see. There are so many names I can see. But anyway, thank you so much for joining. Keep in touch. keep joining us for our programs. I think this is a good time when we can see each other and hear each other. So thank you very much. Take care. God bless you.
Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank
Yes.
you.
Jai Hind.
Eh,
Namaskar. Namaskar.